All right, hello and welcome to the Off by One Security Stream on this Friday, April 5th. Hopefully everyone had a good April Fool's Day. Nothing too crazy happened. I actually fell for a couple of Twitter. I pulled it off. It's like I knew I was in on the joke, but I really wasn't at first. And I retweeted something that I thought was real. I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Oh, damn it.
I think it was probably the same one that I fell for. Was it that new research about like a new phishing tool?
Yes, it was evil.
Yeah,
It was Kuba Gretzky. Don't tell anybody. Oh, shoot, we're live. Never mind.
I fell for literally the exact same one. I'm like, wait, this is so interesting. And I sent it to my team. And then I was like, no. Ignore that. Like literally 10 seconds later. That's not real. Ignore that.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because then I commented after it. I'm like, but we'll probably see this thing coming pretty soon. Like it's going to be a real thing, so I don't feel too bad.
Right. I'm like, just give it like maybe a month. It'll be real.
Great, awesome. So again, welcome everyone. Today we have a special guest, Rachel Tobac, which I'm sure you have heard of her and her awesome work, interesting things at DEF CON and Black Hat and all that, and on CNN maybe, or 60 Minutes was it, right?
That's right.
Right. Some awesome stuff. And it's so obviously important because I think back to like my mom, for example, calling me and asking me, is this thing a scam? And that was, I'm very proud that she was asking if that is a scam, but
Yeah.
it was very like not very well done. And people almost or sometimes fall for it. So nowadays,
I know it's like we're seeing people fall for things that we question, like how in the world are they falling for that? And then it's just going to get more and more salient, more and more believable over time. So that's kind of frightening. Like, oh wait, they're already falling for it. How bad is this going to get?
yeah, for sure. And I've been like the whole AI thing in general and machine learning, there's adversarial ML, which, I learned this from the various people who are studying this stuff, like Mu Hacks, for example. He's one of the guys first in on the NVIDIA, but now he's got his own company, Dreadnought, I think it's called. But he was telling adversarial AI is when you're attacking the actual machine learning algorithms and prompt injection included as well, poisoning the data sets and all. But then there's offensive machine learning, which of course is then, I guess, what most of us are going to consider more important and useful is using AI as an aid to our attacks. And the things you can do already is just pretty amazing. So
it's shocking for sure. And we're just getting started here. So I can only imagine how wild it's going to get.
Yeah. Yes. It's interesting. All right. So, so for this session, everyone, I definitely ask questions. It's not very often that we get someone as amazing as Rachel on to talk about their specialties like social engineering and all of that. And I know I've got some questions. I got a lot of questions in advance that some of you had sent across via Discord, DMs, or somewhere else. I think some people learned that if I send the question early in advance, it's more likely to get asked while on the stream. So good thought there. But let me, I guess, just jump in. Actually, first, why don't you tell me a little bit, Rachel, about your company and kind of what you do for work?
Yeah. So I'm a hacker and I'm the CEO of SocialProof Security. So I do human hacking. I focus everything in my company around social engineering prevention. Oh, Jeff's here. Hi, Jeff. So we just focus on social engineering prevention. So we do that through live events, live hacking demonstrations, training, videos, workshops, and of course, penetration tests, actually hacking people.
So the social engineering village at DEF CON, right? You've been to that, of course, you've competed in that, right?
Yeah, social engineering community is unbelievable. The DEF CON social engineering competition is where I got my start. So I ended up competing. I think it was almost like 8 years ago now. I'm trying to remember exactly which one it was. I think it was DEF CON 22 or DEF CON 23. And I ended up getting second place my first time ever competing. So
Wow.
Never hacked anybody ever before that I know of. And then I got in that glass booth. I ended up hacking. It was one of we can just say like a large consulting company. Ended up hacking them live in the glass booth, and I ended up getting second place my first time hacking them. And then the next year I got second place again. And then the next year I got second place again. And I was like, you know what, that's enough. Like I'm good. Second place is good enough for me. And then cut to, I think it was 2 years ago now, at the social engineering competition. I actually got to be a judge. So that was a pretty cool full circle moment to get to score the competition that started my career.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think the first time I had seen some of your work was with the baby crying in the background, and
that wasn't me.
That wasn't you?
Thinks that was me. No, that wasn't me. She's an amazing hacker, but she is before my time. Yeah, all of the videos that are me are that like CNN Donny O'Sullivan video where I'm hacking like his like airline points and putting them in the middle seat on the
Right.
that's my first like really big video that I think most people probably saw. I think we filmed that in 2018 or maybe 2019. I think it was 2018.
Right. I know I've seen all of them, but yeah, that one from a long time ago. I know I'm mixing two up, but I know that there was one that it'll come back to me. But so are there any, like, when you're doing those kind of competitions, are there any legal concerns or anything you have to watch out for before you kind of go and do that? Are there?
Yeah, there's a lot of legal concerns. So if you are going to be doing a live hacking demonstration like that, you've pretty much got to get consent. So at DEF CON, we do not get consent before we go ahead and target those companies, which is, it can be pretty legally scary. And you have to make sure that there's nobody recording in the audience. And, you know, most states are two-party consent. So if you are recording people, you're breaking wiretapping laws. So it can get pretty serious pretty fast. And it's hard. I mean, it's like nobody wants to be the police at the social engineering competition, right? But we really have to make sure that like nobody's recording. Otherwise, there's a major issue. Jeff said, I think the baby crying in the background was Jen Fox. I don't believe it was Jen. I think her name is Jess, and she is an amazing hacker. Jen Fox is also an amazing hacker. I learned a lot from her prior to my first ever social engineering competition. Jen's amazing.
Awesome. I'll have to check that out. Cool. So let's I guess jump into a question here. This one's interesting. So and this kind of falls on what I was just asking, I believe. I've heard the term pretexting quite a few times with very different definitions depending on who I ask. The questions around the legality of performing campaigns. And I watched your CNN session. Is it okay to practice against live targets to see if you can get information from people? And any recommendations on lines we shouldn't cross? So it's definitely an expansion of, I think, my question.
Yeah, for sure. So first, what is pretexting? So I'm just going to start like basics for a second, just in case you're new to this. Social engineering, human hacking, the hacking of people. Pretexting is who you're pretending to be. So it's essentially like who you're acting as, who you're portraying. And it's more than just a lie. You have to come up with a full background story. You got to be willing to be them, know who their boss is and where they live and their date of birth and all of that, because you might get asked any sort of questions to verify identity throughout those processes. So you really have to like assume their identity. And then from there, how do I get started in something like this? I actually recommend, because you need consent to do it, to be able to do these hacks, specifically over the phone. I think if you want to start there, that you contact your own service providers as you without being able to verify as you. So you can give yourself consent, right? So call up your cable company and say, hey, there's an issue on my bill, maybe a question that you have, maybe you want to lower your bill or something like that, right? And you might say something like, hey, I'm so-and-so, I want to change some information on my bill. And they might say, okay, great. What are the last four digits of your social security number? Or what's your date of birth? Or what's an address you lived at? And then just say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, like totally blanking on that last address, and just see what information they ask you to verify your identity and see what happens if you don't verify your identity using the correct protocols. That's a really interesting way. I mean, you don't want to waste people's time, right? But if you actually have a question that you want to ask them, see how far you can get without verifying your identity using their typical protocols. Because a lot of these organizations use what we call knowledge-based authentication, KBA. Things like mother's maiden name, date of birth, old addresses, to check that you really are you. So see how far you can get without wasting people's time and being obnoxious. And then from there, I'd say there's the lines that you can't cross, right? You can't try and get into somebody else's accounts without their consent. The only reason why I was able to do that with Donnie, and I think we'll show some examples from 60 Minutes in a second here so people can get a sense of what I'm talking about, is I had consent. I actually had consent from everybody that I hacked. So in this 60 Minutes example that you're going to see in a second, they wanted me to hack Sharon Alfonsi, who's actually the correspondent for 60 Minutes. And then they also were like, how are you going to hack her? And I was like, well, I'm going to target her assistant. So I had to also get consent from her and be able to trick her to stand in as a stand-in for Sharon in front of the lights, in front of the audio, and have her mic'd up and everything. So she knew she was going to be hacked. She just didn't know where, when, and how. And I was still able to trick her. So you can get consent and still be successful. You just need to be a little bit creative about how you set up the pretext and the attack. But it is very important to get consent.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. Thank you for that. That helps me as well, because perfect. Hack yourself. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Jeff chimed in here real quick. So essentially reverse engineer with this person's flow chart. What happens when a customer doesn't have their PIN handy? What happens if they can't receive a confirmation
Yeah,
SMS?
that's exactly right, Jeff. So like the whole so a lot of my pen tests I would consider to be account takeover pen tests. That's when a company hires me to hack a bank or take over a customer account or take over a user account internally. And so pretty much what I'm pen testing, like exactly what Jeff said, is I'm kind of reverse engineering the support person's flowchart. What questions are they going to ask me? What questions do I need to be able to give the answers to? What's the order of the questions? And a lot of times I will receive the answers to or receive the questions rather, and then I will go and look up the answers and then call back. So you kind of do hacking, initial kind of recon, and then you go into OSINT, the open source intelligence, to be able to answer the questions, and then you go back into hacking. So it just kind of depends what questions they ask. Sometimes it's really easy, and they just say like, "What's your phone number on file?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I found that from a data brokerage site in 10 seconds, so I'm in." But yeah, it just depends on the company.
Are there ever any concerns about the other side of it? Like, so could someone get in trouble, lose their job, or any issues that you should watch out for?
Yeah, I mean, when I do a pen test, I actually make my customers sign that they won't fire anybody that's involved in the pen test. And that's really important to me because the purpose of a pen test is not to figure out who to fire, it's to figure out what's wrong with your processes. It's not the customer support person's job to on the fly come up with the best identity verification protocols. That's the security and privacy's team job. So if the support person is given a protocol and says, ask them their date of birth, and I furnish the date of birth that I found on a data brokerage site, I did everything I was supposed to do as the attacker. They did everything they were supposed to do as the person trying to quote unquote defend. And they really just need to update their protocols. So when people say like, oh, fire that person, it's like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
The airline or the bank needs to do a better job at protecting the accounts is what really needs to happen.
Yeah, and I know like a lot of companies feel like they're not getting anywhere when they do these campaigns where they'll send to every employee an email to try to phish, but obviously it's fake. And then whoever falls for it, they'll say, hey, you fell for this, is what happened. And a lot of companies always say like, hey, every time we run this, the same number of people end up falling for it. So we don't feel like we're getting anywhere. And one thing I said back, tell me if this is a good answer, but I always say like, well, maybe someone didn't have a flight that day and the email was about, hey, your flight has been canceled. And so different people are going to fall for it based on how relevant it is to them at that moment in time.
Right. That's exactly right. Nero actually says, have you tried using AI for voice cloning? So maybe this is a really good segue to show that 60 Minutes clip.
Sure.
Does that sound good?
Okay. Yeah, Randall in the background. Can you pop that on?
If you don't know how a criminal thinks, then you really don't know how you can protect yourself online.
Rachel Tobac is what's called an ethical hacker. She studies how these criminals operate.
So ethical hackers, we step in and show you how it works.
Tobac is the CEO of SocialProof Security, a data protection firm that advises Fortune 500 companies, the military, and private citizens on their vulnerabilities. We hired her to show us how easy it is to use information found online to scam someone. We asked her to target our unsuspecting colleague, Elizabeth. Tobac found Elizabeth's cell phone number on a business networking website. As we set up for an interview, Tobac called Elizabeth, but used an AI-powered app to mimic my voice and ask for my passport number.
Oh, yes, I do have it. Okay, ready?
Tobac played the AI-generated voice recording for us to reveal the scam.
Elizabeth, sorry, need my passport number because the Ukraine trip is on. Can you read that out to me?
Does that sound familiar?
Yes. And I gave her, wow.
I have your passport number.
Sitting over there.
What did it say on your phone?
Sharon.
How did you do that?
So I use something called a spoofing tool to actually be able to call you as Sharon.
Oh, so I was hacked and I failed hacking.
No.
But everybody would get tricked with that.
Yeah.
Everybody would. It says Sharon. Why would I not answer this call? Why would I not give that information?
Tobac showed us how she took clips of me from television and put it into an app that cloned my voice. It took about 5 minutes.
I am a public person. My voice is out there. Could a person who's not a public person like me be spoofed as easily?
Anybody can be spoofed. And oftentimes attackers will go after people. They don't even know who these people are, but they just know this person has a relationship to this other person. And they can impersonate that person enough just by changing the pitch and the modulation of their voice that I believe that's my nephew and I need to really wire that money.
There you have it.
That's cool stuff. Yeah, the call spoofing and the text spoofing. I remember when that first came out. I had this friend of mine who would never answer the phone, so I was able to call him with his girlfriend's phone number, and then he answered the phone. And then I said, "Hey, why don't you answer the phone when I call?" He's like, "What the heck are you doing?" It's like,
Yeah. It's wild. I mean, like, I think a lot of people don't understand just how common spoofing is and how easy it is. I mean, the apps are available on the App Store. It costs $1. It takes 10 seconds to set up. And you can even play like background music. You can even change your pitch within the app itself without even using a voice cloning tool, because not every pretext calls for a voice clone. Only if I'm really pretending to be a specific person do I need to do a voice clone, if that person knows that voice. But like when I'm hitting customer support, they don't know what Donny O'Sullivan sounds like. They just know like it should sound like Donny O'Sullivan, like you'd expect Donny O'Sullivan to sound like in general, right? Like pitch. So that's kind of all I need.
so those voice cloning apps, I've seen it some places say we only need 3 seconds. Another place we need 60 seconds. Like, how much do they really need to do a good job?
Yeah, I've seen some AI tools that claim they only need 5 seconds. I think that's a little dubious. I'd say 11 Labs is probably the most highly regarded tool right now for voice cloning, and they require about a minute and a half, 2 minutes, something like that. It just depends on the person. Their accent actually matters a lot. So it's actually a lot easier to voice clone somebody with an American accent. And that's because, of course, 11 Labs probably has Americans working on their team, and AI tools are biased towards the type of individuals that build the tools, and so they probably trained a lot of the models and the data on their own voices, and so it works really well on American voices. It's interesting.
Like, I happen to be in Hollywood right now. I'm in a hotel, and I was just thinking, like, Christopher Walken. I remember seeing him here at this hotel I'm at, and he's got an amazing voice. Like, I wonder how well it would do at cloning someone like him, since he's got such a heavy kind of accent that he puts on.
Yeah, I really don't think it would be super strong at doing a Christopher Walken. I mean, we could try, right? I don't want to try right now because I feel like it would take forever to tune it appropriately. But there's a new tool within 11 Labs called speech-to-speech synthesis. So it allows you, if you're good at impersonations, it allows you to tell the tool the cadence, timbre, tone, kind of a little bit of pitch, and how long you want each word to take. So it's possible that you could, if you do a good Christopher Walken impression, you could do speech to speech into the speech to speech synthesis tool and see if it pops out a good Christopher Walken. But I think you'd have to be a pretty good impressionist to do that really well.
Because imagine, like, if you impersonate an actor and we're calling a studio and pretending that, like, yeah, I'm not going to be there. I don't want to do this TV show or something. You could do some real damage.
Oh, yeah. You could do some massive damage. Oh, so, can I answer this question from Jonathan here?
Yeah, I was just going to say, answer that question.
I work with the military a lot. Yeah, I work with a lot of like government groups. So some of them that I work with are like NATO, US Air Force. I am on the Technical Advisory Council for CISA. So I like to work with these folks that take security like super seriously. So I can actually talk about what I did with the US Air Force because they wrote a blog post about it, which is really neat. So, and like, I think it was 2018 or 2019, they hired me to do phone-based hacking. So hacking via voice calls to the US Air Force. And they wanted me to try and take over accounts. So essentially contacting help desk and seeing how far you could get. I can't tell you more about what happened and the results, but I can tell you that I did that. And it was like one of the most fun projects ever. I really like these account takeover penetration tests because it really mimics like what actual criminals are doing. Yeah, you can call somebody up and siphon out sensitive information. Like, I think that's really neat. And I think it's something that criminals do sometimes, but we really see like ransomware groups are taking over or doing account takeover, or not even honestly continuing to use malware sometimes because they just take over accounts and gain access to admin access. Like the Twitter hack of 2020 happened that way, where they just called up somebody in customer support, spoofed an employee that worked there and gained access to the admin panel, and then took over all those accounts and pushed crypto scams. I mean, we do see similar attacks that do lead to ransomware. Like that's what happened with the MGM attack, where an attacker calls up help desk, hey, I need to reset my MFA and password, and ends up getting access to a pretty high level account. And obviously we know what happened from there. Ransomware took over and they ended up paying $15 million in ransom.
Yeah, that's wild. I heard Caesar's also paid the ransom, but it was like pour under the table and interesting stuff. But
Scary, yeah.
so one question, I want to get to this one that someone sent in early from someone named Ezra. Who are the best candidates to perform social engineering campaigns? For example, I've heard that women can be more effective, but it's not inherent. The women who perform well at it need to be extremely convincing. I'm a woman. How can I practice this? I don't want to use my husband as the guinea pig. I already social engineer him. Wow, social engineer him enough as is. Are there certain ethnicities, religious groups, other orientations and such that will work better than others?
Yeah. So we do have a little bit of data about this because we've been doing that social engineering competition at DEF CON for years. And there's a lot of different types of people who apply to be in it. In general, women tend to be pretty successful. So we've seen a lot of women win the social engineering competition or get second place. So yeah, we know that women are more successful than other groups, which is kind of cool. And we think it's because women are maybe inherently overlooked. Like people think, oh, that person has like a higher pitched voice and they sound so kind. And maybe they sound like my sister or my mom or something like that. Like you kind of get some inherent trust there. Just because I think in movies, a lot of attackers are kind of portrayed as like a dude with a hoodie in a basement. And you just don't expect me to be on the other end of the line asking you to install something or update your machine or give me your password. It just doesn't sound like what you'd expect, right? So in terms of like practicing, I do recommend calling up your own service providers. That's kind of one of the only ways you can do it with good consent. And then from there, I think improv is like a really good way to practice your skills on the fly. So Jeff says, I hear very good things about taking improv classes to be better at social engineering. And that's exactly right. I used to perform improv prior to the pandemic. On the weekends. And I found that one of the most helpful things for me in learning just how to react on the fly is just being a good improviser. I mean, being funny on the fly is the same as kind of reacting in character when you're hacking on the fly. There's not a huge difference there.
Interesting. So there was another really good question someone sent. So I know we talked about this a little bit, but the question goes a little bit more deep, and I think it's a good question that folks want to know the answer to. So how does Vishing really work? Do I need a lot of audio? We talked about that a bit. Is it really that convincing? I'm a cynical person. And I just don't believe the whole $25 million hack story where AI was supposedly so good at trick the victim into sending that much money. Were the attackers really able to spoof the video and speech in real time?
Yeah, that's fun. I think a lot of us find that claim that that person in that Hong Kong multinational fell for a $25 million scam. We find that claim a little bit dubious just because it's like, maybe they just stole that money or maybe they were on the inside or an insider thread or something like that. But we don't know. And there's no way to know if that's actually what happened. All I can tell you is that, yeah, it is possible to do these types of attacks live in real time. So when I did that attack for 60 minutes, I did hold an entire live conversation with the voice clone with Elizabeth. Now it is kind of uncomfortable and there's latency there. There's definitely a delay. So I'm like holding my phone up to the laptop, typing in what I want to say. And then I have to hit generate. It sometimes takes like 2 seconds to generate. And then you can't listen to what the generation is before you play it. You just have to go because you're on the fly and sometimes it's off. So you actually see in the video for 60 minutes, Elizabeth looks at her phone like, wait, what is going on here? That's because she was like, there's a latency and it's so weird. So she wanted to confirm on the caller ID that it really was Sharon calling.
Oh.
And she let me know later, like, yeah, the latency was like really strange. And I'm like, I know there's nothing I can do about it. You just have to pretext it away. Like, oh, sorry, I have really bad service or something like that. But yeah, I mean, there's also tools to do this integrated live into like a Zoom or a Teams call. So yeah, there are tools like Deep Face Live is a good tool that you can use to make your face look different and actually do a full deep fake live and have like your face look like anybody else's face. It's pretty intense and it does take some setup. So I don't know every attacker is going to use it 100% right. And there are some ways to thwart it. Like if you turn super fast to the side, you can tell that it's not real. So yeah, I mean, it's just not 100% yet. I do find that claim to be kind of dubious.
Yeah, totally. It's funny too because I saw like you remember how a while ago, I guess it still happens sometimes. You could always tell like an AI photo because there's like a sixth finger or something like that. There's something a foot's missing. There was a guy on Twitter posted he's selling these little finger rings, which is a ring with a fake finger sticking out. He's like, that way you can blame AI and it wasn't really you.
Yeah, I know that plausible deniability is pretty scary. I think those artifacts are starting to become harder and harder to notice. Like there was this picture that was AI generated of a crash of a Cybertruck, like those like Elon Musk's like big old Cybertrucks. And I could not 100% tell that it was AI generated. It like the wheels looked a little AI artifacty, but I don't know the Cybertruck that well. I didn't take time to compare to the other alternate wheels. So yeah, I think we're kind of entering into a world of hurt here where it's going to be pretty hard for your average everyday person to spot what is AI and what's not.
Right. I was just going to ask, like, do you think forensically it'll ever get to a point where it's really hard for them, for good forensics people?
I would hope not. I'd hope there's some artifacts or metadata, but we know that metadata can be stripped. So it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future. My guess is that it's not going to get easier for us to figure out. It's probably only going to get harder. But my hope is that it's not impossible. Just like how, nothing is unhackable. I hope that it's also that nothing is unfindoutable or unfigureoutable when it comes to AI. Like we'll be able to kind of reverse or understand the artifacts or metadata.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally see in the future, even now, people saying, that wasn't me, that was AI. Somebody made that. I didn't do that. And you're going to have good job for forensics people.
Yeah. I mean, we're already seeing people in a political situation. We're not going to get into this in too much detail, but claiming that audio that was authentic of them is AI generated. So we're definitely going to see this plausible deniability issue pop up in multiple arenas.
Yeah. So for people out there who always ask, kind of, what path should I go down? Should I go down vulnerability research with binary exploitation? Because it looks like it's becoming ridiculously hard. Like this looks like a good opportunity. Be a forensic specialist in like reverse engineering photos and audio and all that. Daljeet asked an interesting question. Is there any mitigations out there for phone spoofing? And if not, why?
Yeah, there are not good ones. I mean, in other countries, they have all banded together. All the telcos came together and instituted certain protocols. I believe it's called Stir Shaken to make it really hard to spoof. But in the US, all of our telcos have not come together thanks to capitalism. So we can still spoof because we would need T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, literally everyone to come together and make the exact same protocol work. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter what one telco does. It's still going to be possible to spoof from another.
Right. And I've seen a lot of people asking now, like, well, do you think automation will get to a point where there's automated checks going on to make sure that something is not AI generated?
I hope so. I think that we're going to see a lot of technology that's employed to check against AI. My fear is that it's not going to be as good as human-based checking. Like we're already seeing that news story that came out that said like that Amazon just walk out or whatever tool where you could just like go into a grocery store, grab some food and walk out. And they claimed that they used AI to see if you paid for the right thing. It was actually just 1,000 people in India that were paid to check and make sure that that was authentic footage and that you really were scanning that right thing out. So, I mean, people are claiming that it's AI when it's actually human-based. I think that we're going to see a lot of that.
Right. Do you think, are there enough services? Like, has it been commoditized at this point where there's like a ton of options out there now for doing voice cloning and kind of doing all the things that people might want to do in relation to social engineering? Or would it make sense for somebody to kind of go experiment with building their own?
Oh, I think people should definitely experiment with building their own. I would say 11 Labs kind of cornered the market in that like it works really well and people find it to be really authentic sounding, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't build something better. So if you have the skill set to build something better, like definitely try that. You just got to keep in mind, like ethically, how is it going to be used? I think that's kind of like a big challenge right now for a lot of these AI tools. OpenAI, I'm sure, is sweating it out, thinking about how people are going to use Sora unethically. So we're going to see issues pop up like that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because I played around one time. Somebody had mentioned a little bit ago a library in Python. I played around with that a little bit, but it's like it got really cumbersome and it looked really like once you get into the models and such you have to build for it, it looked really hard because there was this guy out there who basically used some Python modules and such to write their own voice cloning tool, and it was just ridiculously large and all these kind of modules that are not very good yet. They're kind of in test mode and things breaking all the time. Like, I think I would definitely recommend, I mean, it's good to experiment with that stuff, but I think I recommend going with the stuff that's tried and true and already working really well.
Yeah, I won't ever discourage innovation. If you have the skills to do something, go for it, but realize that you're going to spin your wheels for a long time. And there are tools that work really well in the meantime if you want to try them.
Yeah, Stanley asked a good question. Is it doxing if you give the OSINT information to just the authorities? I believe that the authorities are behind in the cyberspace.
I don't think it's doxing if you have a situation that you need to talk to the authorities about. I would make sure that the way that you communicate that to the authorities doesn't have a super big paper trail, because people might say like, maybe you got that information via hacking, and they might get upset about it. So yeah, I think there's like kind of gray areas there, and it just depends on the way that you communicate it, the way that you find the information. Is it truly OSINT, or did you actually hack and gain access to someone's emails or something? I think that's a problem that people run into, where they kind of get vigilante on things, and then they're like, oh, I actually did hack that. I didn't realize how far I went. I actually hacked them, and now the authorities want to talk to you and not that other person.
Yeah, it brings up another interesting point where, like, I've had people in classes that I've taught, especially like the more introductory social security kind of essentials type courses, where people are like, well, is it illegal to go up and knock on people's doors and just see who's there and walk down the street and just keep doing that? Or is it legal to like see if their doorknob is unlocked, but not actually go in? It's like really fine line between a crime and not a crime. And I can imagine in the social engineering realm, that's got to be very complicated.
Yeah, I would say all of the things that you mentioned, don't do. Like anything that has to do with you going in person and trying doorknobs, like you're just asking for, I mean, even if it's not technically illegal, I mean, people, at least in our country, they're strapped, right? So I certainly would not do something like that. And especially if you don't have like a good reason for it, or, you aren't contracted by a company. So yeah, I would say it's most important that if you're going to do some sort of social engineering attack, that you have permission, you have consent, a clear scope, and what's out of scope is going to be just as essential.
Yeah, and interference is that criminals don't care about the law, and that's so true, because like I remember seeing this. I don't remember, it was XKCD or something, but it was a comic, and it showed a medieval castle, and there was like the dragon was sleeping, and the guards were asleep and drunk, and there was a big hole in the side of the wall of the castle. The moat was dry, the bridge was down, all these horrible vulnerabilities, and then there was a tower in the castle, and at the very tippy top, there's like this big bars on the windows, and there's a circle around it, and it said pentest scope.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
that's right.
If we can't do the things that the attackers are going to do, that's why I like red teaming, because you can typically go a little further.
Yeah, it's one of those things where humans don't react the same way that software does. So if we go too far with human beings, there's morale issues, there's people wanting to quit, there's going to be problems where people don't want to work there anymore. They don't trust their team to keep them safe. They feel unsafe at work. And so you can go really far with code, because you're not harming people when you test something in a test environment with code, right? Whereas if I call people up and I start screaming at them, because that's what a criminal would do, that person's not going to want to work there anymore if they learn that's sanctioned by the company. Or I tell them, hey, you just got fired, you got to hand me your laptop, and I come to their house and open their door. Like, sure, maybe a criminal would do something totally wild like that, but I can't do that as a social engineer. I have to work ethically and really consider people's how they're going to react, their morale. We have to make sure that we keep people safe, and we don't use fear or harm-based pretexts. It's like essential to our work. Otherwise, we're just as bad as criminals, and we're just harming people left and right.
Right, totally. And two people have asked this now. One person in advance, and I saw a question fly by a little bit earlier, but I'll do a combination of the two together. One person said that a good pen tester should not care if someone's watching over their shoulder the entire time. Like, they're not trying to hide their tricks, because they know they're good at what they're doing, and their job is to educate the customer and help, defend. And but there are some pen testers out there who they try to hide what they're doing. They don't want you to see, because they don't want to give up their tricks and all that. And similar to a social engineering, basically the question comes down to like, what are some of your tried and true like attack techniques with social engineering that almost always seem to work, like the ones you go to?
Yeah, I mean, every social engineer I know has like a playbook of 10 pretexts that just work every single time. Number one, this is what we see criminals do too. So they will pretend to be IT support. We do the same thing in our attacks. So calling up an employee who is in scope, saying, hey, this is IT support, we need to update your machine, and either using a remote access tool that they then walk through with us on their computer, steal things, gain access to documents, folders, exfiltrate data. You can even get passwords that way in the Slack. I mean, there's so many things that you can do when you're sitting at somebody else's computer with a and then from there, I would say the social engineers who like using the phone are always going to want to ask sensitive detail questions. So things like, what are your latest projects right now? Hey, this is the CEO, or hey, this is the executive of your division. We just wanted to check in with you, see how everything's going. How are your KPIs? How are your metrics? What are your top projects right now? I just want an update. And you can siphon out so much data just by asking questions. So a big one for me is things like asking about mergers and acquisitions and deals that are upcoming, asking about their payment processes so that I can siphon out that information and then eventually steal money from the accounts. Now, a lot of times when we're taking over customer accounts, we can't go as far because we can't actually damage real customers and steal their real money. So there are some parameters we have to put into place. But like attacking customer support as a customer is like one of the top things that I personally find interesting, because customer support it's the first line of defense for a lot of companies.
Yeah, like I was always wondering, how do you, with someone who is cynical, I guess some people just are going to be real stubborn, which is a good thing. But what are some techniques or tricks you can do to kind of earn their trust a bit? I hear you say you can kind of socialize with them a bit, ask them about some things, and they'll give up information because people do love talking about themselves for the most part. So what's a good way to kind of break down that communication? Not the trust, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, building rapport with people. So if you've ever read the book by Cialdini, it's called Influence. He's got principles of persuasion in there that we pretty much see in every single attack. So one of the first ones is reciprocity. It makes it really easy to build rapport. So I tell you about what's going on in my life. You tell me about what's going on in your life. Like we actually just did that yesterday. If you remember, you told me oh, I just did this drive. And I said, oh, I've done that drive recently. Like it was super tough. We're commiserating about the same thing. Right? That's really, really useful information. And then from there, we can build rapport. We can be friends. We can talk about things that are happening at work with a little bit more openness. So we definitely see reciprocity work really well. Then from there, things like urgency and kindness, we call that liking in the principles of persuasion, are really useful. So if you ever saw my Donnie hack where I put him in a middle seat in the back of the plane by calling up his airline and pretending to be him, I just did that by talking to that person for about 5 minutes, talking about, I used to work in customer support. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. Thursdays and Fridays were always the worst, and talking about details. And then from there, went in and said, hey, you know what? I'm actually working on this project. I went back and got my master's. I got to do this weird thing where I write a story about what it's like to be in the back of the plane, be in the middle seat. What's that like in this year? And they were like, okay, yeah, it's pretty weird, but we built rapport, we're talking, I kind of know you now. So sure, I'll go ahead and do that. So if I've got a sense of urgency, I got to get this project done by tonight and I got to do it right now. And can you please help me? It works really well. Like when I'm hacking, there's kind of two main scenarios that I try and bucket my attacks within. Either I'm helping you or you're helping me. So either I'm helping you, I'm pretending to be IT support, Norton Geek Squad, your internal IT support, help desk, etc. Or you're helping me. I'm contacting customer support, pretending to be a customer or an executive or IT support or anybody else who works within the company, right? So there's kind of those two main buckets, and anything outside of that, we don't see work super well. You need the empathy. You need the helping factor to kind of be there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, does kindness work better than the opposite of that and being kind of rude and saying, look, you need to do this right now or you're going to get fired? Have you tried that approach?
Yeah, well, I never try that approach because I never use unkind or fear-based pretexts. We know criminals will do that. So I educate teams on what a criminal might sound like when they're kind of putting the pressure on and being really mean. I don't do that personally. I always use kindness, and I don't ever need to be unkind. Kindness works for me almost every single time. 9 times out of 10, I do get in, unfortunately. And every single time I'm kind. So
9 out of 10. Wow.
Yeah.
That's scary.
It is. And this is pre-updating protocols. So after we do a pen test, we update protocols in a protocol update workshop. So like we actually talk with the customer support team or the service desk team or whatever team we attacked. And we say, how can you verify that people are who they say they are? What do you do now? I already know because I just pen tested, but what do you do now? And then what's like a menu of options of things that you could choose instead? Like you sending a code to the phone or email address on file to thwart spoofing, to verify identity with MFA, service codes, PINs, passcodes, using another method of communication via Slack, like anything really works.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, so there's a couple more questions came in via DM. Some people just don't like to post in the public forum, I guess. I'll get to those in a moment. But I was on an airplane once and I was complaining to the guy next to me, and I was at the what do you call it? The right behind first class.
Oh, the
bulkhead
premium or whatever.
Yeah, it's like the bulkhead seat or something. One way you have the most space in front of you. And I was telling the guy, like, because just recently, United Airlines, they moved my seat without my consent. Like I got on the plane and I was not in the seat that I assigned. I know I picked the right seat. It's not the first time it's happened. I was going to say.
I didn't do that.
No, but it brings up a good point. So he goes, oh, do you know how I always get free premium economy and bulkhead seats? I said, how? And he goes, I call the airline and I tell them that I'm bringing an infant and that I'm traveling alone, that I'm a father, I've never traveled with my baby before, and I'm just so scared and freaked out. And they always put him in the bulkhead because they move people out of their seat and put him there. I was like, that's horrible.
Wow, that's wild. My dog wants to say hi. Is that cool?
Oh, sure. Of course.
Come here. You want to say hi to everybody? Oh, good boy. Oh, nice. Good boy. This is Snugs. He's a very good boy.
Hello, Snugs.
He likes to be included in everything, so he wanted to say hi. Okay, be a good boy, okay?
That's awesome. How old is he?
We don't know. I adopted him 10 years ago, so he's at least 10. That's all I know.
Nice.
Yeah, good boy.
So one question was around, well, this is a comment question. This person has asked me before about binary exploitation getting so hard, and like, what are the attackers going to do next? And I imagine people always say humans are the weakest link. I imagine that social engineering will just start to increase as some things get more difficult, that you go for the lowest hanging fruit. Have you seen like an uptick in social engineering attacks?
Yeah, we have, unfortunately. So I think it's because I got Snugs hair in my mouth now. I think it's because we are seeing technical tools become much more, they're catching a lot of like phishing attacks at the inbox stage. So they're quarantining a lot of these attacks. So we're seeing that attackers don't necessarily want to attempt to attack just technically. They want to maybe do something that's a little easier, because think about it. Everybody's lazy, right? They don't want to take unnecessary time to be able to get their end goal, which is power or admin access or money or whatever they're trying to steal. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. We're definitely seeing that people are switching to things like phone calls, because phishing via email is getting harder and harder with the detection tools. So like, definitely we're seeing that. And we're seeing a big increase in text message and phone call based attacks, and a big increase in AI attempts. So people changing pitch in calls and things like that. 100%.
Right, for sure. I imagine stuff like crying and stuff would probably go with what you were saying about trying to get people to empathy, sympathy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I usually don't do a lot of crying. I actually try to make people laugh more than I try to make people feel bad for me. I have noticed that people are pretty disarmed if I can make them laugh. And that's something that I'm more comfortable with than attempting to cry during a phone call.
For sure. Mr. Spearfish asks, I don't know if that's a surname, but asks, advice for physical penetration testing. Have you done a lot of that? And do you find it to be more effective than voice?
Yeah, I actually don't do physical pen tests. People always think that I do, because a lot of social engineers do, but I'm not comfortable with doing that, because in America, a lot of times with security, they use guns, and I don't want people trying to shoot at me. And number two, if you do it in like the UK, they use dogs, and I don't want to get bit by a big old dog. So I don't do physical security pen tests, but a lot of my friends do in the field, and they say it's super effective. That being said, they do also sometimes say that, you know, like a nation state or a really, really skilled attacker will potentially try an in-person attack. But a lot of times the attackers are going to do things virtually or over the internet or over the phone. So, you know, it's pretty bold to show up in person and try something. Nation states will definitely do it. Espionage, like Other companies that are maybe attempting to do espionage or attack definitely will do it, but it's kind of like pretty high caliber. You have to be a really, really persistent attacker to do it.
Yeah, you think of like an informant who's like in a motorcycle gang trying to like get information for law enforcement. That sounds scary.
Yeah, it's pretty terrifying. I feel more comfortable over the phone, chat, email. That's kind of like my sweet spot. I like to do that. In person, I feel like my heart would just be racing because I'd be like, don't shoot me, please. Like, that's terrifying.
My one physical social engineering thing that I ever did was I used to work at UPS when I was very young as like Christmas time driver kind of thing where I'd go out and deliver packages, and I worked at so I had a UPS uniform is my point. And years later, I thought, wouldn't it be a great idea, because I had heard some interesting things that people did via social engineering. Wouldn't it be an interesting idea if I put a UPS uniform on and I go and try to see if I can get past security front desk? So I did that, and I was so nervous on this one, but I had a box with me. And I came into the front desk and security was there, and I said, it was a different building I haven't been in before. And I said, hey there, they're like, oh, where's John? I'm like, oh, John's out sick today. I'm running 2 routes. I'm in a rush. Like, where should I put this? Like, straight back through there, right through the security gate. And like the way to validate that it was me to call the manager who I was working with, or better yet, if I could plug into the network and actually message him. And it worked. It works perfectly.
I'm sure it worked really well. Yeah, those types of attacks are pretty effective. We see people holding boxes. I mean, there's like the classic sneakers example of like holding a cake with balloons from like my favorite movie. Yeah, that's effective. Clipboards, a ladder is like the most effective thing that I've ever seen in my life. Now, for me, person under 5 foot carrying a ladder, I don't know if it tracks. I don't know if they're going to believe that I'm actually getting up on that ladder, but maybe I bet that would work for you. People tend to judge me. They think I'm not going up on like a 16-foot ladder.
It sounds fun. Like when I did that, it was like I got a rush, a high off of it. You know, like I just went running for 10 miles, and I was like, I want to do this more. So that brings up a good question that I saw someone else ask, like, how should they get started? Because it's one of those catch-22 situations they're saying where you kind of already have to know how to do it to get hired for it, but you can't do it unless you have a job. Like, what do you think they're getting into it?
Yeah, I think you probably should take classes. Like, there's definitely good classes. I think does Sands have a physical security class? I know Deviant Olem teaches physical security classes. He's a genius at physical security. I know Snow has physical security courses as well, like at Black Hat. That's a really good way to get experience. Do not just try to hack into companies. That's not going to be good for you.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct.
Does Sands have physical security courses? I actually don't know.
No, Sands, we used to host Deviant's class, but Sands does not have a physical social engineering class, no.
Cool. Yeah, Deviant's a genius at it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to jump in that class because you see all the stuff they have in there, like the elevator hacking and safes. And like, looks like so much fun. Like, I didn't realize how easy it is to hack the elevators when they have the key card access to get to certain floors. It's ridiculously easy.
It's ridiculously easy. And like, he taught me how to do so much on just his YouTube channel, like that under door hacking tool where you like put the metal into the door and you can like open the door from the other side. It's just like, oh my gosh, like that's so scary and so easy to do. But yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah,
absolutely. This is an interesting question. Someone's saying, how do you feel about the long game? For example, hanging out where the people smoke cigarettes slowly over a couple of weeks, building up the trust, and then piggybacking. Does that work?
Definitely works. Yeah, absolutely. You don't always have that long for a pen test to like hang out and like build rapport for 2 years, like what happened with the open source security vulnerability guy, that XZ vulnerability, you know what I'm talking about, the thing everyone's talking about last week. Where he like hangs out in the OSS communities, is making like small commits for 2 years and then introduces like a massive backdoor. Like that is like serious determination and skill to do that. But most people, if you're not a nation state actor, which I'm assuming that guy was, you probably don't have 2 years to build rapport or even 2 weeks. You probably have like about a week usually, something like that. And that's a week to do everything, not just build rapport with the smokers.
Of course. I don't even smoke. So that guy, I've seen the question that guy asked, and someone else asked a similar one, so I'll combine these. But the question is around the future of verification. Do you see things like biometrics increasing to kind of help with things like social engineering and prevent people from being able to get in as easy?
Yeah, definitely. Like there's a lot of ways to consider biometrics. I think what you're telling me is something like to be able to get into your apartment complex, do you think they'll like scan your retina? No, I don't think they're going to employ techniques that are that expensive for like everyday folks and everyday activities. I do imagine that we're going to start seeing more like palm scanning. Like we're seeing that with Amazon right now for some of their, I think like at Whole Foods, if you want to use your Amazon code, you can scan your palm, which like, I don't know if I need to give Amazon my palm for something like that. Just do a QR code or something. But I really like to think about biometrics as it relates to pass keys. So right now, the way that people think about passwords is not great for everyday folks, right? They use the same password. The majority of people reuse their passwords on multiple sites and apps. But now we're seeing passkeys roll out and it kind of just functions in the background. They just like use their Face ID or they use their fingerprint on their iPhone to get into certain websites. And that's going to be really hard for me to gain access to those accounts because I don't really have anything to steal.
Right.
I'm not going to get in there and steal their biometrics and then like wear their face. Like that's just not going to happen. I'm not going to spend all that time. I'm going to spend time on someone that I can siphon a password out from them over the phone in 10 seconds.
Yeah, totally. Admin asks an interesting question. I guess pull out of this what you'd like. Have you been able to hack email service like Exchange by using a valid email address of a potential victim? Have you been able to get valid email addresses of CEOs and CFOs through social engineering?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's pretty easy to get.
Like, no problem.
Yeah. It's pretty easy to get that information. You can enumerate it definitely. You can find it on data brokerage sites, but a lot of times it's pretty easy to find that information just relatively simply. Did I lose him? Did I hack him and now he's gone? Steve, are you here?
I kicked out. Sorry.
I hacked you.
Yeah, thanks. Did I cut off a question? Did you finish the question?
I finished the question. You can ask me the next question now.
Okay. So let me see. Get back up where I was here. That's more of a comment, but I'd apply to SocialProof if you start a physical pen test unit. Oh, so if you start a physical penetration test unit, this person would like to apply to your company.
No, I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, I'll let you know. Interferon Recon. I will keep you in mind for that.
For sure. Yeah. I was trying to think of another example that I personally wanted to ask you, but I might have to jump back to the audience for their questions instead. But there was something I personally wanted to ask, and the whole thing threw me off, and I got kicked out of the room.
How do you know that wasn't me taking over your stream, whatever yard?
Well, if you're multitasking like that, well, maybe it's not you I'm talking to. I don't know. But we'll go with that guy. There's a question. I'll get back to mine. What do you look for in a new hire? So how do you like know someone's a good social engineering candidate?
Yeah, I look for experience. I mean, that's really what's really useful to me. If you have taken good courses and you have good, certifications, like that's great. But it really comes down to experience, and getting that experience, even if it's with something like DEF CON, is really effective. So if you've competed in DEF CON, I've gotten to see you in action. I've seen your live hacking demonstration calls. I get a sense of how you think through OSINT. That's really useful for me. It's really tough when people are like just focusing on certs and exams and things like that, because I need that like real world, like practical application. How do you do on the phone? How do you come up with your pretext? What does it look like? What's the process for you? And you don't necessarily need to get that in a job. Like if you're fresh faced and you're brand new, just competing at DEF CON in a certain CTF is going to give you a lot of experience.
Yeah, for sure. Have you ever tried interviewing someone that way? Like, hey, I want you to act like I'm your target and I'd like to see how you do your thing? Or is that kind of putting somebody on the spot and weird?
No, actually, that is like a big part of the hiring process is like, imagine I'm this person and you need to gain access to this flag or piece of information. How would you do that? Go ahead and do it right now. Yeah, it's tough. It's scary, but it's cool.
That's right. So I think you talked about this a bit, but maybe elaborate more on how you got into like what made you want to get into social engineering. And
yeah, if you listen to my Darknet Diaries that came out this week, you might be a little bit bored by this, so I'll just try and go a little bit faster than normal. But I get started at DEF CON. So my husband was in security. I used to work in UX research, and before that teaching, and before that I worked in a rat lab. I studied neuroscience in school. Like I was not in security at all. So my husband was like, hey, you got to come to DEF CON as a security guy. He was like, you're going to love this. Like, it's all improv in this glass booth. It's all social hacking. You don't need to know how to code. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to fit in. He's like, you're going to fit in. Like, you're definitely going to fit in. You need to come. So I ended up booking a flight out Saturday or Friday night for my first ever DEF CON, which I think was like DEF CON 21 or 22, something like that. And I get there, I see the social engineering calls the next day, Saturday. It's like DEF CON's like half over at this point. And I'm like, I want to get in a glass booth. Like, I want to do that. That sounds so fun. I could totally do that. And he's like, I know, I told you you'd be good at it. So I ended up applying. I made like a Twin Peaks looking video to apply to like show my personality. And they're like, yep, you're weird enough. Come on and join. And then, yeah, that was my first time ever hacking. And I asked a bunch of people for advice. I could not name them all because there's literally like 50 people who helped me with my first ever pretext. Snow, the social engineering hacker that I think is amazing, is one of them. But yeah, asking for support and getting in there and doing my first ever hack in the glass booth. And then I got second place, first, second, and third time doing it consecutively. So I'm like, cool. I think I should do this full time. And then from there, people, they watched me compete. They watched me hack and they were like, first of all, you should definitely be doing this full time. Second of all, can you come talk to my team about how you hack? And so I started my SocialProof Security business in 2017.
Nice. So what's a couple of people asked this one. What's the most awkward or uncomfortable situation you ever got yourself into during one of these engagements?
Yeah. The attacks that happen over Zoom are terrifying. Like, I cannot express to you how terrifying they are. I will sweat through a blazer so deeply that I need to change my blazer for the next interview. So I actually also just talked about this on Darknet Diaries, but I've done this multiple times, so I can tell you a slightly different story. Company oftentimes will want me to get on Zoom and ask sensitive detail questions. So this one Darknet Diary story that I told yesterday is the company wanted me to siphon out M&A information via the hiring process. So I applied for a PM role. During my 7 interviews, I'm not a PM, so it took me a lot of research. I actually was able to siphon out what I needed to during the Q&A portion of the interview. So that's pretty terrifying. I mean, it's so sweaty. It's so nerve-wracking because if you do it wrong, you've got 6 more interviews that day. And like, they're probably not going to answer your questions. And they're going to be talking about you in the Slack. Like, this girl was so weird. She asked me questions about like our upcoming merger, like definitely don't hire and like, don't talk to her. So you have to be really sly about it because you can't just one and done and then leave. Right. So the Zoom call attacks are horrifying, but I love them. And then anytime I'm on video, even if it's not Zoom, like anytime I'm being recorded while I'm doing these types of attacks, it's like pretty nauseating in general. Yeah,
that's funny. That guy says Zoom court. There's been so many crazy videos of somebody in court on Zoom doing weird things.
Yeah. Like that guy during the pandemic that showed up like a cat. And he's like, no, I promise you I'm not actually a cat. Yeah, like that would be me during my interviews. Like, I promise I'm not actually a hacker. Like, I just look like one right now. I'm just so sweaty.
Right. Big YouTubers asked the question a couple times. I guess kind of a general question. Is it a good idea, I guess, to get a job in cybersecurity? Is using YouTube to build a channel and doing hacks on that, like building up kind of a reputation and brand, is that a good way to land a job, I guess, if you're new to the field?
I don't think it hurts. I think you can show off your personality and show off, how easy you are to get along with and have on guests and how good you are at conversations. I mean, a lot of just getting hired is a lot of soft skills in addition to your technical expertise. So people want to hire people that they want to be around, that they want to have conversations with and tinker on stuff with. So yeah, if you can show off how fun you are to tinker with, I 100% think that could help you get hired because we just want to be around people we like being around. That's just how it is, right?
Yeah, you got to make sure you put the face on the image though, going like, I hacked my neighbor's Wi-Fi.
Or you could do like a VTuber thing where it's like a little anime character and you just like are very fun to be around. I mean, that's fine too. It's just whatever works for you, right?
Yeah, totally. All right, we're going to wrap it up here soon. If any final questions coming up or anything from anyone, please post them now, but we are going to get on with our weekend here pretty soon coming up. Yeah, follow Rachel on Twitter for sure. I guess I'm trying to think of a final question that I want to ask. The one question I really had never came back to me, so I'm going to email you soon and you're going to get a question from me. I guess so. What about your training? Do you offer public training or is it only for private customers? How does that work?
Yeah, sometimes I do public training like at conferences. I did a social engineering, pretexting, and voice phone hacking training at SaintCon pre-pandemic. And I'd probably do it again. I think it's really fun. It's like a 3-4 hour training where by the end of it, you're comfortable on the phone actually doing those attacks. It's not that hard of a skill to learn. People are like, doesn't it take like a week-long class? I'm like, no, no, I can teach you this in 3-4 hours. It's honestly not that complicated and it's not that technical. So yeah, it's more so just like getting the confidence to jump on a call and ask the questions that you need to ask for the hack. That's pretty much it. And knowing how to pretext, knowing how to phrase it, how to deal with the punches and roll with it.
Yeah, but that is a good question I just came up with after what you just said, which is I know it's going to slip my mind again, and I'm going to forget it. But basically, what would, like, when cyber in general, we have different types of aptitude testing to try to identify people that who may have no experience in technology at all, but if they do well in a certain gamified test, that they're likely a good candidate in cybersecurity field if they want it. Are there any personality types or characteristics or traits that someone might have that would let them know, hey, I probably would be a good social engineering person?
I think honestly, the best test is competing at DEF CON. Like, just do that, because you can prove to somebody, you're not going to have to write about it or demonstrate it in an exam. You can just show somebody on the fly, I can do this, I'm capable, and I'm successful at it. You don't even have to win it. You don't have to win the competition. You can just show that you're capable. Competing at DEF CON, doing CTFs and showing real world experience like that is, I think, very effective.
Yeah, totally. All right, we'll take this one as our final question. Have you been able to social engineer Wall Street law firms before? Tell us all the details. I'm just kidding.
You know what? I've actually been hired by a lot of Wall Street law firms. I can't name a single one because I would get sued to the high heavens, but you can enumerate them out just by going on Google. Yeah, I mean, in New York, there's actually a rule about testing and social engineering prevention. So since the state enacted that law, I've gotten just a massive amount of requests from New York law firms.
Wow.
Yeah, and they asked me to try and steal money and convince somebody to give me insider trader information and siphon out information about upcoming M&A, and just anything that you could imagine is really interesting for Wall Street law firms. It's actually a really common request, which is fun.
Is there, I know I said last question, but is there a lot, like, for someone going into this field, do you think it's a good path to go down? Is there a ton of competition in the space, or are there opportunities for people to come in?
Oh, there's so much opportunity. Like, think about all the companies that exist in the world. There's just a fraction of them that any social engineering or hacking firm or penetration testing firm is in contact with. There's definitely enough room for more players in the space, for sure.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. This was really fun. Loved having you. I'd love to have you again at some point.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want me to bring my dog one last time on stream? Should I grab him?
You can say hi. Yeah. Also, feel free to try hacking me sometime. You know, I'd love to see if I get tricked.
No, my gosh, we'd have to come up with
my permission.
No, we'd have to come up with a scope. I'm not comfortable just like blindly hacking you like that.
All right, puppy.
So to say bye to everybody. Say bye.
All right, bye. Make sure you go out for a walk. Take him out for a walk.
He's gonna go out after this. He's gotta go.
All right. Well, have a great weekend.
Me.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.